Okay, so hands up. How many of you knew this was a helmet in Elden Ring? Well, I didn't until recently. It's actually one of the rarest helmets in the game, and being a big fan of the majestic Octopus myself, it made me wonder, can I cosplay as an octopus and beat Elden Ring? Well, only one way to find out. So, how does one do this? Well, unlike Bloodborne, there aren't literal tentacles we can use, so we're going to have to get a bit creative, and it also gives me the opportunity to try out a weapon class that I've wanted to for a while, the humble and often understated whips, which will represent my tentacles. I'll wield one in each hand at all times, and I've got a spell in mind which will also fit this theme, which we'll get onto later. I'll also be naked outside of the Octo helmet for the entire run, apart from one specific circumstance which I'm fairly sure you can guess. I'm going to complete all Remembrance bosses on this run as well. But anyway, with that brief little intro sorted, let's get the build set up. Melina sets us up with some horsepower, and we ride into the Weeping Peninsula, the only place where it rains almost as much as the UK. Our first whip is hidden away in Castle Morn. We just got to light this grace and then drop down these beams to grab the very imaginatively named whip. For our next whip though, we're going to have to travel a bit further afield, all the way to Liurnia in fact. This is, as far as I understand, the only other whip we can get at this point in the game, so we mission through grabbing the Academy Glintstone key on the way, as of course we'll need it later. Our destination is Carrier Manor, but I don't carry about anything else in here, so I just run through to the second level, where we can then drop down to this part here, run to the right, and grab the second whip, the Urumi. I also do some usual chores like grabbing runes, leveling up to 19 dex, and a point or two in intelligence, and now we're all set. For this run, I mostly plan to use the power stance attack with L1, including the jump variety of this, but there will be some examples where a simple R1 will be needed. I grab Hoarfrost Stomp from Carrier Manor and equip it to our Urumi for some nice frost damage. Now, we of course need our octopus head, and this will be a bit tricky. You see, the only way to get it is as a drop from those little land octopi, but the chance of them dropping it is 0.5%. After about an hour of this, I was already bored, so I reached out on Reddit, and luckily a kind user and watcher of the channel named Murderous Banana was happy to drop me my treasured headpiece. Thank you, my friend, you have saved the run. Just look how fantastic I look, positively tentacular. With that sorted, there's a couple of other pieces of setup needed. We grab the map here from East Limgrave, take the longest lift down ever, and then surprisingly struggle to kill this scarab. That's probably not a good sign. But we eventually do to get Oracle Bubbles. Now, to be honest, I was really hoping there was some kind of spell or incantation that resembled the lobster's spit attack, as that's pretty close to an ink spray like an octopus would use, but I couldn't find anything, apart from maybe darkness, but that's pretty useless. So this is the best I got. More on this in a little while. As with most runs, I cheese up the Knights Cavalry in Caelid for a cool 42 grand souls and level up Intin Arcane to allow us to use our new spell. It fires out some slow moving bubbles. Awesome. Well, it would be pretty good if we actually upgraded any of this stuff we just grabbed, wouldn't it? So let's run on down into Rhea Lucaria Crystal Tunnel to fight Logan's Wet Dream for its bell bearing. Now, you might actually notice that our attacks are doing a decent amount of damage. The normal whip does strike damage, which Crystallians are weak to. The Urumi however does slash damage, hence why the second hit is doing quite a bit less. But regardless, once he's stance broken, it's mega easy as always, and now we can go upgrade everything. After a little more ball farming and purchasing the stones of course. Both whips and staff are now +6, so it's probably about time we fought a real boss. Hello Margitti took a pretty small amount of damage from our bubbles and responded by smacking me in the face. After a few more bubbles, I decided to switch over to my trusty tentacles and get some jump attacks in, mainly just because they look really cool. The range of the whips is great, so no danger of them missing. I didn't manage to get a stance break or a frostbite proc, but it didn't matter. I was in tentacle on winning, and that's just what I did. I now had 2 talisman slots, which was kinda useless because I hadn't even filled the first one. But given how much stamina was being used by the tenta combos and jump attacks, I decided on the green turtle talisman for one of them. I know I could have gotten Radagon's Source Seal, but I feel like so many runs start by getting that I wanted to just try something a bit different. I found that the whips, probably to the surprise of no one, work a lot better against NPCs than the knives do. The stagger is great, especially from the jump attacks. Eat this, tarnished Anastasia. I wanted to get a sweet affinity for my normal whip, so I got Flame of the Redmanes. Worth mentioning that I'm only going to use these for the affinity, I'm not actually going to use the Ash of War attacks, as I think it would defeat the purpose of using the whips. Plus, with that Flame of the Redmane's nerf, what's the point in even using it? Fire would also be especially useful, as I needed to kill this Erdtree Ang to get its beautiful tears, and of course, wood plus fire equals Bernie Sanders. Shield and health regen are mine. I now feel confidence flowing throughout my suction cup covered limbs that we can handle Stormveil. Remember how annoying these birds are normally? Well, turns out the whip's sweeping range actually handles them really well. The damage isn't incredible, but we hit reasonably fast and normal enemies tend to get staggered pretty easily. It's dominance by protuberance. Even this sneaky knight in this dark room was no match for us. I'm also a big fan of the running L1, stylish and deadly. Octopus is really in fashion it seems. But it occurs to me we have one talisman slot still empty, and when I see an empty slot, I feel a strong urge to fill it. I know just the talisman, just gotta climb up this ladder here and... Right, that's it. Whoop, 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 whoop. Anyway, as I was saying before I was so rudely interrupted, we grabbed the claw talisman, providing us with a 15% boost to jump attacks. Very handy indeed. If I had hands, that is. I just have little nubs on the end of my many limbs. I have become the octopus, damn it! You know, sometimes it's easy on these Souls challenge runs to just run past every enemy and book it to the bosses, but I really wanted to give the whips a chance to show what they can do. One thing I found is that I can actually hit the troll in the face with them, causing him to hold it as if I just whipped him right in the eye. I got a nice stance break, and then slapped him silly till he died. Wonderful stuff. Also, have a good look at the landing here of the jump attack. Pretty cool, huh? Respect the octopus. Write in the comments right now saying Octopus is a beautiful, majestic creature. If you don't do it, I'll send some real octopus to crawl up out of your toilet. Sorry, I got a little carried away there. Anyway, Godric Astley told me he was never going to give me up, never going to let me down, but unfortunately he did because he got poise broke by the bubbles very quickly. He got poise broke by the frickin' bubbles. Just as phase 2 started, I was able to proc frost. The advantage of having a fire whip also is that it gets rid of the frost, allowing me to instantly start to try proccing another, which is very handy. I actually didn't even need it though, as he is just not very difficult anyway. With a few more hits, Godric said that he was never going to say goodbye and then died a second later, meaning that earlier when he said he was never going to tell a lie, that in fact was a lie itself. Even I don't know what the hell I'm writing here anymore, guys. Now normally, I end up doing Rhea Lucaria here, but I fancied switching things up again, so let's actually go straight away and climb the Runestrewn Precipice. I want to give one of my brethren the secret tentacle shake, but he didn't respond well for some reason. Hank? You okay? There's a ledge at one point here with some soft cotton right at the end, an item that reduces fall damage. Makes me wonder if From were hoping someone would use it and then try to jump from here. Such trolls. Much like birds, bats are very annoying creatures who can often be hard to hit, but not with our flailing anti-air weapons though. Even the singing ones, which are normally an absolute pain to deal with, get smashed down no issue, and then the rest of these bats take a battering. Take that, you flying rodent tossers. Now, I'm actually going to get an item that I've never used on any Elden Ring run before, the Lost Ash of War. I use this to duplicate Hoarfrost Stomp, so now I've got dual Frost Whips, a useful trade as fire will really not work well against the boss of this dungeon. That boss being this Magma Worm, who pretty quickly made me realise that I was probably underleveled for this, especially in the health department. I guess that's my karma. Phase 1 was pretty easy. I managed to get a stance break and then procced Frost, bringing him into Phase 2. In Phase 2, he gets some giant sweeping attacks which can be tricky to avoid, but yet essential for me to do so given my health situation. I tried using the bubbles a lot to break his poise, but it didn't seem to happen, so I ended up switching back to Tentacle Slappy, just one jump attack at a time. The damage was really not great, and even with both whips frosty, getting another frostbite just wasn't happening. It was actually a little close, but he couldn't worm his way out of this one. Thus far, Octopus beats birds, bats, and lizard. Truly the most dominant creature. Up in Altus, we can do numerous extremely exciting things, like activating graces, grabbing golden seeds, grabbing a smithing stone bell bearing, and whipping this guy in the face repeatedly. Shame he couldn't evolve into a Steelix Lord, or he might have stood a chance against our Octillery. With a bunch of the smithing stones purchased, I was able to execute the devastatingly skillful maneuver of pressing X repeatedly over each of my weapons in a menu screen, leading to them being upgraded to plus 12. Truly, only a Soul Series master could have pulled this off. Let me know in the comments if you're one of the 1% that's ever managed to do this. I missioned back to Rad Meme Castle to speak with the popular NPCs, and then prepared to face Red June down in the Redans. Now, to the surprise of no one, but me and my supreme ignorance when it comes to upgrading my health bar, Redan actually one-shotted me with many of his attacks. Our damage was also absolute trash. After getting crushed a couple of times, I felt a sense of star-scourgency. I needed to actually come up with a strategy for once. First, I easily killed Grail by dragging my tentacles across his face, giving me a fat chunk of runes and upgrading to a mind-blowing 25 vigor. I had a plan to bring Redan down without having to grind horrendous amounts more, so I grabbed the Two Fingers heirloom and also the Blood Flame Blade incantation. I then switched my Arumi to an affinity that allowed buffs to be applied. With this, it was easy to kill this completely immobile dragon who couldn't even attack me, and now I had 30 vigor, which would allow the inevitable mistakes I would make because I'm an extremely poor player of these games. For my Redan strategy, this is one of the few times I would use R1 attacks on this run. First, do the despawn trick to get Redan to come to you. As he gets about halfway, drink the physic and cast Blood Flame Blade. Now, use just R1s to attack with. The damage is really trash, but the main goal is to hit enough times to proc bleed. Cast it again if needed, and hope for the cross sword attack. The bleed should bring him to the range where he buffs his swords, at which point apply rot grease to the whip, get behind him, and hope you get enough hits to proc the rot. Attack normally until the meteor, dodge that again, and then apply Blood Flame Blade again. Now it's just a matter of surviving and getting hits in where you can. The rot will take off a pretty good chunk of his remaining health, and again, the cross sword attack is your friend. Unless that happens. I applied Blood Flame Blade again at the end here, which it turns out was absolutely unnecessary, and shortly after, Redan was left seeing stars. A cheeky level up later, and we knock Run down to visit the Eternal City. Want to see Octopus versus Octopus? Here you go. As well as just changing up my route, I was also keen to kill Redan quick because getting down here means we can grab the Black Wet Blade, letting us apply bleed affinity to our weapons at the Grace Site. Blood Flame Blade is good, but I prefer not having to repeatedly apply buffs. So now we have a Blood Arumi and a Frost Whip. For pretty much no reason apart from the fact that I felt like it, I decided to take out Morgot again en route to the capital. The damage seems to have really dropped off, but thankfully Frost and Bleed do a bit of the heavy lifting. Now, just as I was about to go into the capital, I discovered something. You see, my plan had been to get to the mountaintops of the giants right away to do the Volcano Mana quest to get the Hoslo Whip. But it turns out that not only can you actually get a second Hoslo Whip, but you can actually get it now by going and killing Diablos here in Liurnia. I never even knew that you could find him at this location, but I'm certainly grateful. He gets his horns stuck in a wall and then takes a thorough whipping. What makes this whip great, as well as its higher damage, is the fact it has innate bleed, so infusing it with poison means that this whip has both poison and bleed at its disposal. So of course, this made the Draconic Tree Sentinel really easy. No, of course it didn't. Damage was pretty poor, and of course I can only take 1 or 2 hits, but I did come up with a strategy. First, sneak up behind and spam the bubbles. 4 bubbles staggers him, allowing for some hits. Both whips are spec for poison, as I think that's going to be the most useful for chipping away at its health. My whips do okay damage with the jump attack, but it's not amazing. Honestly, I'm actually surprised that I won here. I made a couple of pretty bad dodge mess-ups, and by the time the Sentinel had 40% health remaining, I had no flasks and about half health. Thankfully, I still had the physic regen going, but things were not looking up. I luckily managed to proc another load of poison, and pretty much just played stay away until the Sentinel's health was low, attacking only on certain opportunities, such as the lightning strike, and then I finished him with a few more whips, giving this Draconic a colonic. Much like Overcooked Octopus, this was pretty tough. In the capital, there was another Ash of War I could grab, Thunderbolt, to give myself some lightning affinity that would for sure come in handy in this next fight. I also completed my usual ritual of grabbing the shield talisman, because with no armor on, this is quite useful. Goldfree is weak to lightning apparently, but the whips weren't upgraded as much as they probably should be by this point. I know I could go and get smithing stones from some of the minor dungeons instead of pushing through here for the next bell bearing, but I'm feeling stubborn. Anyway, his moves were pretty easy to avoid, and the dodge and whip strategy worked. Eventually. By the way, At this point, I'd kinda decided to ditch the bubbles as the damage was very low and I didn't think it was really contributing much to this run. I switched back to bleed affinity on my Arumi and then fought this Black Knife Assassin, which only further confirmed how powerful the stagger is on the whips against human-sized enemies. It even seemed to interrupt her grab attack. The jump especially is really difficult for them to handle. To keep the momentum going, let's take down Morgot. My combo of bleed and poison should work a treat here. I feel like I got a bit lucky in phase 1 here, and he did a lot of easily punishable giant hammer attacks. Phase 2 was definitely a bit trickier, but I figured out some new openings, and thanks to watching Press Continue's recent streams, I now know how to dodge the spear charge, which is tremendously helpful. After a few more wildly flailing tentacles to the face, Morgot got more than he bargained for, especially after the fight. Apparently octopi aren't allowed in here though. What kind of mistreatment is that? But at least now we can move on upwards to everybody's all-time favourite area, Mountaintops of the Giants. Here we can grab the next smithing stone bell bearing and get our whips nicely upgraded. The smithing stones do get a bit pricey though, so I wanted to get Mwin open ASAP for some easy blood echo farming. I actually did some invading of real human players for once to move Vari's quest forward. Not sure what these guys must have thought about being invaded and killed by some naked whip guy wearing an octopus helm. If either of them are watching this video, yeah, sorry about that. But anyway, we got to Mwin and we got our whips nicely upgraded. I think the best bet is to get the second Hoslo Whip now, and for that I need to go to Volcano Manor. I took the Express Ryway to get there and joined the Manor to take on the assassination quests. First, I cancelled this Knights Only Istvand's account. Next, this guy stood idle and had a really bad time. And now, we get the final and most important assassination quest for Juno Hoslo. Just to mention, as we travel here, there is another whip you can get by farming this Fire Prelate guy, but looking at it, I don't think it's worth the aggro of trying to do it. So here we go, the true battle of Dual Whip versus Dual Whip. Thankfully, Juno stands there like an idiot at the beginning and gets slapped for it. The jump attacks just absolutely smash him, although he did nearly catch me at the end here. But down he goes. Didn't you know that I'm the whip master around these parts? With that, our second Hoslo Whip is secured. I won't be retiring the Arumi completely, because with enemies that resist strike, it will still come in handy. I've spec'd the Arumi with pure blood, so after getting poison in with the dual Hoslos, I'll switch to the Arumi to focus on bleed. So, Fire Giant. I can tell our damage is a lot better than before since we upgraded our whips, but it's almost hard to tell because he has so much health. But I surprised myself with how well I did here. This was actually my first attempt, which sadly ended because I got stuck against a rock and caught with the fire explosion. Phase 1 is pretty straightforward. As mentioned, the damage is pretty decent when we break his weak point, but Phase 2 is a slow slog, even with the poison. It's just baiting his hand slams, hitting the hands, and occasionally jumping on Torrent to run around for 10 minutes to avoid that annoying fire spit attack. This fight went on for 14 minutes, but half of that was just getting through the last 20% of his health because he just wants to spam eruptions and fireballs. It's hard to even get enough frequent hits in to proc the poison, and I often misjudge if I'm far away enough to avoid his double hand slam. But finally, with probably about 10% of his health left, I get the poison in. I pretty much just need to survive now, and the fight is mine. I just go for one jump attack here and there, and finally we give the Fire Giant a seafood allergy and we manage to kill him. As poison and bleed are our statuses of choice, Arcane is getting pumped hard from now on. I got Farah Mazula unlocked, but before spending too much time fighting the best boss in the whole series, I thought I'd go clear up some other business first, starting with the Academy. I mean, at this point we were pretty over leveled. Look at the damage the whips do to the Red Wolf of Radagon, just another animal that is inferior to the Octopus. This carrier knight got beaten so easily that he went from Moon Grum to Moon Glum. Watch this, and write in the comments below what you think would be a good caption for this clip. For Renala herself, well, we technically did her in one cycle because the poison still hurts her while she's floating, but she doesn't actually die till she comes down again, even if her health hits 0. For Phase 2, I always wonder, do you think Renala has a boat she uses to travel across this water? I guess then she could call herself Sailor Moon. I, of course, being an octopus, was at home in the water, so I really got cracking and finished off Renala quickly. Truth be told, the real reason I decided to come back and do her now was to respec to get rid of some useless points in Int and get Arcane all the way up to 50 for max power, as well as grabbing the blue dancer charm from the High Road Cave. What the hell is this thing doing? Looks like his battery might be running out. So let's get the Tweedle Duo out the way. Luckily, I had a strategy already in mind thanks to the throwing knife run. The rolling attack from the Noble, once my biggest weakness in this fight, had now become my greatest strength. Focusing attacks only on the noble but leaving the apostle above half health meant that almost every single time I was left to my own devices to attack the noble while standing on the broken pillar, apart from the rare occasion the apostle would chuck a fireball. Bleed and poison help to bring down the health bar, and thankfully they don't gain too much more resistance each successive time. After 3 kills of the noble, the health bar was low enough that I could focus just on the apostle and end this quickly. Godskin Duo down on just my second attempt. I think that's got to be a personal best for me. I really wasn't expecting my whip tentacles to carry things this far. What's even more crazy is they aren't upgraded to max yet, but with the duo down, we can indeed do that thanks to them dropping the last bell bearing. I also grab an ancient dragon smithing stone from here in the mountaintops, where I couldn't resist cheesing these stupid birds through the mouth of this skull. I also killed Garank for another one in a fight that definitely wasn't close whatsoever, and then I grabbed one more from here in Farum Azula. All 3 whips are now upgraded to max, and we're ready to roll. Dragon Lord Flaccid Socks is up next, who unfortunately has a big old health pool and a high resistance to strike damage and statuses. So yeah, this is going to be long. I went with just one Hoslo and the Arumi for the whole time here, as I felt bleed would be more useful in the long run. I did actually get a bleed proc, which was pretty handy and pushed him to phase 2. But once again, the last part of the boss's health bar takes by far the longest. At least I can pretty consistently avoid most of his attacks these days. I actually even got the laser attack twice this time round. After 13 long minutes, he finally falls. Pull your sacks up, Plassy. Before pushing on to Malekith and the final boss rush, let's try clear up those other remembrance bosses, shall we? Loretta was laughably easy at this point, and I actually thought I might kill a jeweler before it flies off. Is that possible? Has anyone done that? But anyway, I did all that Rani quest stuff, got through the Rotto Grotto, and prepared to have an annoying call with an Astella Marketer. Compared to the other Remembrances bosses I'd done recently, this was a much quicker fight, but I guess that was to be expected. Can we add scorpions to the list of animals inferior to octopi? In any case, damage is great, bleed is good, natural born becomes natural unborn. Similar situation with the Regal Ancestor Spirit. I mean, that damage might look crazy, but it's all legit, nothing illegal going on here. Anyway, poison and bleed get the job done. Now, against my better judgment, I decided that, because I never do them, I was actually going to do the Valiant Gargoyles on this run. Now they are weak to strike, but immune to status effects, so I tried out the affinity known as Occult, which basically turns our arcane scaling into pure damage instead of improving our status build-up. I'm genuinely curious to see what the damage here is going to look like. Wow, okay, that damage is pretty good actually. I mean, I guess they are fully upgraded. That poison spray is still not fun though. I just need to get this one killed, but I really wish he'd keep his bad breath to himself. Seriously, stop doing that. Okay, there we go. With one down, the fight is easier, but I still loathe fighting these guys. Ooh, head hit. This did end up being closer than I'd have liked. A lot closer, in fact, but after my valiant efforts, victory is secured. Sorry, it's pretty dusty in here, I can't stop coughing. But yeah, it turns out Occult is actually pretty good. There's at least one other boss this affinity will come in handy for later. You know which one. Now, on my way into Carrion Study Hall, I had a weird thing happen I've never seen before. Perceptor Miriam dropped down to this ledge and then just stood there, only reacting when I got very close. This was a huge boon because it meant I got to fight them one-on-one until they teleported, but by the time we caught up to them, one attack was enough to finish him. After definitely not frommaging up the Godskin Noble, I got the curse mark, but then got joyous revenge on Fia's champions for the hell they gave me on the throwing knife run. This guy wouldn't take it lying down though, but a series of jump attacks spelled his demise. Next up, Fort Dragon Licky Socks. Who even comes up with these names anyway, J.R.R. Tolkien? Anyway, headshots on this guy do a massive amount of damage, but he moves his head a lot so it's not always easy to land them. But he is vulnerable to bleed and poison, so it doesn't take too long. Those head whips are mega satisfying though when you find that perfect moment to land them. Now, remember I said there was one time I was going to break my armor rule? Well, obviously it's here with Reichard because, yeah, I went and grabbed Redan's armor from the round table and gave it another go. It still didn't go the best, but to be fair, I think I probably need more health and more flasks to pull this off. So let's go take on some other demigods first. I snagged up all the golden seeds I'd missed, gave myself nothing but crimson flasks, and then headed back to Farum Azula to take on Malekith. Now, I had hoped that I'd gotten better at dodging Destined Maladeth's attacks after the throwing knife run, and while I think I've definitely improved, one mistake can still lead to him decimating my health bar. Phase 1 is fine, the windows are pretty obvious to attack, and poison helps to whittle his health down. I didn't manage to get a bleed though because my attacks were too infrequent. For Phase 2, poison again was invaluable as it allowed me to keep doing damage even while I was waiting for openings. It was actually kind of refreshing just fighting with pure melee, not having to worry about buffs or FP. I was patient, and waited for the openings I knew I could punish, and we send Malekith McFarlane back to Quahog with one final jumping tentacles attack. Back in the capital, I was now the Ashen one. I needed to make a quick trip to the sewers, and for once actually fought this lobster in a battle to prove who was the superior seafood, and surprise surprise, it was in fact me. What, you want some too? Yeah, that's what I thought, you scuttle away now. I actually came here because I wanted this item from Mohg's basement, but also ventured into the ever-fun Lanedale catacombs to fight this Silent Hill fanboy trying to imitate the Capra demon. It didn't go well for him. It seems the gods of Esgard abandoned him. After whipping Eleonora till she couldn't take any more, I could now return to Mwin to take on the president of the Bloodborne fan club. Using the shackle and the combo of bleed and poison, getting him down to phase 2 was a quick process, and the combination of my constant attacks and poison helped to ensure he didn't start phase 2 with too much health. I even got a poise break for the first time in ages. Phase 2 was pretty smooth up until I nearly messed up at the end with Mohg one hit away from death. I have no idea how I survived that, but we got through and we're making some good Moggress. So then we got half a medallion before we rode here on our stallion to whip this boat riding soul right in front of this castle. Commander Neil was lacking, his minions had been slacking, his jumps here had some good tracking, but our whips kept on cracking, then the other half he yields for entry to the snowfields. Okay, that's enough of that. Seemed like a good time to pivot over to handle Gideon off near the massive tosser. I think it's safe to say all my homies hate Gideon, but luckily our attacks stagger him and I was able to finish him off near these steps thanks to the glorious range of our tentacles. Murder Grandpa is our next opponent. I remember really struggling with his first phase when on my first run of Elden Ring, but now the openings are very clear and it's easy to take advantage of his... Okay, ignore that dodge. I said ignore it! But Hoaraloo is a different story. Poison again helps keep the pressure, but something about his moves just throw me off, and I even got powerbombed into the ground at one point. But, with no flasks remaining, I landed one last strike, and we can shout hip hip hurrah because somehow I did this first try. So I was now starting to wonder if the build actually was just pretty good, or if I had just gotten better at the game. Well, given how much I had struggled with dodging Radagon in the past, this would be a test to see if the knife run had in fact helped me get better. So this is where I got to on my first attempt against RAB Beast. Pretty good actually. I went to grab the Crimson Wall bubble tier just for extra comfort, and then went back for try number 2. Worth noting, I switched back to the occult affinity on dual Hoslos for max power strike damage, and oh yeah, I have definitely improved against Radagon. Where before his combos and strikes caught me off guard, here it was like I could see through them. The power of the Octopus fueling me, letting me move with the most supple, flexible movements to gracefully dance beneath his hammer and land tentacle slap after tentacle slap. This was a great fight, but of course Elden Beast awaited. However, it made the mistake of fighting me in water, my home turf. With the Crimson Wall tier in effect, Elden Stars was no trouble, and again the dance of tentacles continued. Elden Beast, once a devastating foe, realised he simply didn't have enough limbs to compete with the mightiest mollusk in all the land. But before you get to see that funny cutscene with this octopus face guy sitting on the Elden throne, let's clear up the last couple remembrance bosses, shall we? I still felt I needed more health for Reichard, so this isn't what it looks like, I promise. Reichard went a lot better this time. I mean, I still died due to getting caught by this onslaught, but it's 100% getting done. Octopus versus Snake, the true battle of boneless entities. Again, I'm wearing the Redan armor because the stagger and lava damage would just be too much without it. Getting close up to Reichard, you can actually slither past a lot of his attacks outside of occasional jumps. I always waited till after a lava stagger has hit me to do a jump attack to avoid being interrupted midway through. Poison and bleed are perfect for high HP bosses like this. By the end, this reptile must be in denial if he thinks that he'd ever match our multi-limbed superiority. Now obviously, there's just one remembrance boss remaining, and look, I could go on a big spiel about octopi being the dominant species in the lands between and show you how I definitely first tried Loretta. Yep, definitely first try. But you all know it's all about Millennia, who I was determined to best to avenge the throwing knife run. So here's the most epic music I could find along with my fight for her. Enjoy! Might I say, this was actually third try. That is the least amount of attempts it has ever taken me to defeat her. So there we are. Octopi now rules the land between. The tentacle will never relenticle. Seafood for all hail my flailing limbs. Whips are pretty cool. At least here, I had a lot of fun using them. Great range and good stagger. Give them a try yourself if you fancy. I think that's officially enough Elden Ring for a little bit. But that DLC is coming soon. Right? If you enjoyed the video, let me know your favourite seafood in the comments below. Subscribe if you want to help support the channel and be notified of new content. Until next time, have a good one, and see ya.